The sun beat down mercilessly on the corner of Wilshire Boulevard and Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles. A man, weathered by years on the streets, sat cross-legged on the sidewalk. His clothes were tattered, his face framed by a scraggly beard and hollow eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. Passers-by hurried past him, eyes glued to their phones or the pavement, as if avoiding the sight of his humanity made him less real. He wasn't an unfamiliar figure in this part of the city. Locals knew him simply as that guy on the corner. No one ever stopped to ask his name, though some had occasionally tossed spare change into his battered coffee cup. His sign, scribbled hastily on a torn piece of cardboard, typically read, "Hungry and tired. Anything helps." But today was different. Today the sign bore an audacious plea. "Elon, I need help to change my life." It wasn't a desperate ploy for attention. It was a last-ditch effort, a Hail Mary from a man who felt he had nothing left to lose. He had spent the last 2 nights awake, rehearsing the words he would say if Musk actually appeared. His heart pounded with a mix of hope and dread. The idea of holding that sign had come to him during one of his rare moments of quiet reflection. He had read about Elon Musk, how the billionaire often touted his willingness to help humanity solve its toughest problems. Surely this was a problem worth solving. Hours passed. He sat there, a mixture of doubt and determination growing with each second. And then it happened. A sleek Tesla pulled up to the curb just a few feet away. The passenger door opened, and out stepped Musk himself, casually dressed in jeans and a plain black t-shirt. His presence was understated, yet electrifying. The man froze, gripping the edges of his sign. His breath caught in his throat as he watched Musk glance around, as though scanning the street for something, or someone. Would this be the moment that changed everything? The man's fingers tightened around the cardboard as Elon Musk's gaze landed on him. For a moment the billionaire seemed to hesitate, his brows furrowing slightly as he took in the bold words scribbled on the sign. The world seemed to blur around them. The chatter of pedestrians, the distant hum of traffic, all faded into the background. "Is this for real?" Musk asked, his tone more curious than skeptical. The man's voice caught in his throat, dry from nerves and the afternoon heat. He forced himself to speak, his words uneven but laced with raw desperation. "Yeah, it's real," he said. "I'm just trying to get out of this. I don't want handouts. I want a chance." For a split second, Musk said nothing. He looked at the man not with pity but with a rare kind of focus, as though he were calculating an equation in his head. Then he did something no one expected. He crouched down, bringing himself to eye level. "What's your name?" Musk asked. "Darryl," the man replied. His voice wavered, but there was a flicker of pride in finally being acknowledged as more than a nameless figure on the street. "All right, Darryl," Musk said, his tone even. "Tell me your story. How did you get here?" Darryl hesitated. His instinct was to give a vague answer, something quick, something palatable. But there was something about Musk's presence that compelled honesty. "So," he told him. He spoke of a life that once held promise, a steady job as a mechanic in his 20s, a wife he adored, and a small house in San Bernardino. Then came the layoffs, the foreclosure, and the unraveling of everything he had built. One bad decision led to another, and before he knew it, years had slipped away. "I've made mistakes," Darryl admitted, his voice cracking. "But I'm not a bad person. I just need someone to believe I can be more than this." Musk nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "If I were to help you," he asked, "what would you do with it? How would you make it count?" Darryl swallowed hard. He hadn't expected to get this far, let alone be asked such a question, but he had thought about it. A lot. "I'd start something," he said. "A business. Something small but honest. Maybe fixing up bikes or old appliances. People throw away so much that could still be useful." Musk stood, brushing invisible dust off his jeans. His expression was unreadable, and Darryl braced himself for rejection. But instead, Musk reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and began typing. "Here's what I'm going to do," Musk said, his voice firm. "I'm giving you $10,000, but there's a catch." Darryl's jaw slackened. His breath caught somewhere between disbelief and cautious optimism. $10,000? That kind of money was more than he'd ever dared to dream of. But Musk's next words hit like a lightning bolt, anchoring the moment in reality. "The catch is you can't use it for temporary fixes. No rent, no food, no quick solutions, Musk said. This money has to go toward building something sustainable, something that changes your life, not just today, but years from now. Darryl blinked, the weight of the offer sinking in. Sustainable? He stammered. Think about it, Musk continued, pacing slightly as if giving a TED talk to an audience of one. You said you wanted a chance, not a handout. So prove it. Take this money and turn it into something that lasts. You'll have to figure out how, but if you're serious, I'll be watching. Watching? Darryl asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Musk nodded. Let's just say I'll check in. If you can show me you've used it well, there might be more where that came from. But if you waste it, he let the sentence trail off, the unspoken consequences hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, Darryl felt the familiar pang of self-doubt. Could he really pull this off? What if he failed? But then he remembered the years he'd spent sitting on that corner, waiting for life to change. Here it was, his moment. He couldn't let fear rob him of it. I'll do it, he said, his voice steadier now. I'll prove it. Musk smiled faintly and tapped a few more buttons on his phone. A ping sounded on Darryl's cheap flip phone, the one he'd barely managed to keep activated. Darryl pulled it from his pocket, his hands trembling. There it was, a transfer for $10,000. Real. Immediate. Good luck, Musk said, stepping back toward his car. And remember, you asked for this. The Tesla door shut with a quiet click, and just like that, Musk was gone, leaving Darryl standing on the sidewalk with more hope and pressure than he'd ever felt in his life. Darryl stood frozen on the corner, the notification still glowing on his phone. The weight of the moment hit him like a wave. $10,000. It was more money than he had touched in over a decade, yet it felt heavier than gold. Musk's words echoed in his mind. This money has to go toward building something sustainable. He knew what he wanted to do, but wanting and executing were two very different things. Darryl's first stop was the local public library, a place he hadn't set foot in for years. It was quiet and cool inside, the scent of old books mingling with the faint hum of computers. He approached a librarian, a kind-looking woman with glasses perched on the edge of her nose. I need to look up and starting a business, Darryl said, feeling his cheeks flush with embarrassment. The woman didn't judge. She led him to a computer, patiently explaining how to use the search engine and navigate resources. Darryl spent hours there, poring over articles, YouTube tutorials, and small business forums. The idea took shape in his mind. A repair shop. He didn't need a fancy storefront, just a small space, maybe a few tools, and his hands. He had always been good at fixing things, whether it was bikes, radios, or old vacuum cleaners. People needed that kind of service, especially in a city like Los Angeles, where the cost of replacing things was often too steep. The next day he walked into a hardware store, his heart pounding. He bought a few basic tools, a screwdriver set, a soldering kit, and a second-hand workbench. Every penny he spent felt like a risk, but it also felt like a step forward. With the remaining money, he found a rundown storage unit in Long Beach, one that the owner was willing to rent for cheap since it had been vacant for months. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. For the first time in years, Darryl felt a spark of pride. He spent his days cleaning out the unit, fixing up discarded items he found on curbs, and spreading the word about his services. He crafted a handwritten sign that he posted on community boards and local coffee shops. Affordable repairs, bikes, appliances, and more. Call Darryl. He even listed his number, hoping someone would take a chance on him. And someone did. Darryl's first customer was a middle-aged man named Victor, who showed up at the storage unit with a busted microwave. Found it in my garage. Thought I'd see if you could make it work again, Victor said, his voice skeptical but not unkind. Darryl carefully examined the microwave, his fingers steady as they maneuvered through the mess of wires and components. Years of fixing things came rushing back to him. Within an hour, the microwave hummed to life, and Victor's raised eyebrows turned into a wide grin. Man, you're good, Victor said, handing over $30. I'll tell my neighbors about you. That first payment, though modest, felt monumental. It wasn't just the money. It was proof that he could still contribute, still matter. Word began to spread, slowly but surely. Darryl's small repair business grew one job at a time. A wobbly bike here, a broken toaster there. His phone buzzed with more calls than he'd received in years, and for the first time, he didn't dread answering it. But not everything went smoothly. The tools he bought weren't top-notch, and they broke more often than he expected. Some customers never returned for their repaired items, leaving him with unpaid work. And then there were the days when business dried up completely and the doubt crept back in, whispering that maybe he was in over his head. One afternoon, after a particularly frustrating day, Darryl sat on the floor of the storage unit, staring at a broken sewing machine he couldn't figure out. His hands shook with exhaustion, and tears welled up in his eyes. What if Musk was wrong about me? What if I'm just another failure? But then he remembered Musk's challenge. You asked for this. Darryl wiped his face and forced himself to get back to work. Slowly, the machine began to take shape under his hands, and by evening it worked as if it were brand new. The customer, an elderly woman named Teresa, hugged him when she saw it. You have no idea what this means to me, she said, slipping him a $50 bill. Moments like that fueled him. They reminded him why he was doing this, not just to survive, but to rebuild a life with purpose and pride. Then something unexpected happened. A local journalist, intrigued by the handwritten signs around town, stopped by to interview him. Darryl hesitated, unsure if he wanted his story out there, but the journalist's genuine interest won him over. A week later, the article was published with the headline, "From Homeless to Hopeful: How a Repair Shop is Changing One Man's Life." The piece went viral, shared across social media platforms and local news outlets. People were captivated by his journey, and the calls came flooding in. Donations, repair requests, and messages of encouragement poured in. Darryl's little repair shop became a symbol of second chances, and he wasn't going to waste it. The article lit a spark that Darryl never anticipated. Within days, his phone rang constantly. People from across Los Angeles and even beyond were reaching out, not just to request repairs, but to share their own stories of struggle and triumph. His tiny storage unit became a hub of activity, filled with repaired items waiting for pickup and donations of tools and supplies from strangers inspired by his journey. One day, a man dropped off a pristine, barely used toolbox. "Saw your story," he said. "Thought you could use this better than I could." Darryl thanked him, stunned by the generosity. It wasn't just about the toolbox. It was a reminder of how far he'd come from that street corner. The article caught the attention of a local TV station, and soon Darryl found himself in front of a camera for a segment titled, "Turning $10,000 into a Future." The reporter asked about Musk's role in his transformation, and Darryl didn't shy away from the truth. "Elon didn't just give me money," he said. "He gave me a reason to believe in myself again, but the work, that's on me." The segment aired during prime time, and by the next morning, Darryl's story had gone national. Social media erupted with debates and praise. Some lauded Musk's unconventional act of philanthropy, while others questioned if the billionaire could be doing more for people like Darryl. Amid the noise, Darryl focused on what mattered, keeping his business running and staying true to the promise he'd made. One evening, as Darryl was packing up for the day, a familiar car rolled up to the curb outside his storage unit. He froze, heart pounding, as the Tesla door opened and Elon Musk stepped out, this time wearing a navy hoodie and sneakers. "Elon," Darryl said, stunned. "What are you doing here?" Musk smiled faintly. "Thought I'd check in. You've been busy." Darryl gestured to the chaos of the unit, a mix of repaired gadgets, donated items, and tools scattered across the workbench. "It's not much," he said, "but it's a start." Musk nodded approvingly. "I've been following your progress," he said. "You've done more with that $10,000 than some people do with $1 million. How does it feel?" Darryl hesitated, searching for the right words. "It feels like I'm finally living again, like I'm not invisible anymore." For a moment, Musk was silent, his gaze scanning the room. Then he turned back to Darryl. "You've proved yourself. Now, let's take this to the next level." Darryl's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Musk pulled a checkbook from his pocket. "Consider this an investment," he said, scribbling quickly before handing the check to Darryl. His hands trembled as he read the number, $50,000. "I want you to expand," Musk said simply. "Hire people. Teach others what you've learned. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about creating opportunities for others." Darryl stared at the check, tears welling in his eyes. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep going," Musk replied, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. With Musk's investment, Darryl moved his repair business out of the storage unit and into a modest storefront on a busy street. He hired 2 employees, people who had been in situations similar to his own, and trained them in the art of fixing what others had given up on. The shop became more than a business. It became a community space where people came not just to repair their items, but to share their stories. Darryl set up a donation jar by the counter, with all proceeds going toward helping others who were struggling to find their footing. News outlets continued to cover his journey, and Darryl was invited to speak at local events about resilience and second chances. His once harsh voice softened with confidence as he spoke to audiences, always ending with the same message: "You're never too far gone to turn things around." One day, a young boy came into the shop with a broken RC car. As Darryl worked on it, the boy asked, "Do you ever see the man who helped you? The one who gave you the money?" Darryl smiled. "Sometimes. But the real help was inside me all along. He just reminded me it was there." The boy grinned as the car whirred back to life. Darryl handed it back to him, feeling the same sense of purpose he had when he first repaired Victor's microwave. Only now it wasn't just about surviving. It was about giving back.